people trickling again. My name is Lisa Sretanovich. I am the Velocity Detective. And along with Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts and Coach Connections, we're bringing this webinar to you guys tonight to help you understand what your obligations are as a business owner for doing 1099 NECs, 1099 miscellaneous, how 1099Ks impact those, and Form W-9. Now, as a business owner, first of all, let's define what it means to be in business, all right? So, in a for-profit business, you are in business when you exchange goods or services. That's financial coaching, or you're a plumber, or you perform in a band. Okay, so if you exchange goods or services for compensation, that means dollars, or euros, or you trade somebody. Like I might trade financial coaching for a business for them to help me with my website. Okay, so barter, right? So compensation, exchange of goods or services for compensation. This is the key point, with the motive to make a profit, right? So if you have a hobby, then you are not subject to 1099 reporting, right? So I have a friend of mine, Denny. For years, he was a woodworker, and he would just charge his customers the material to create for them these beautiful pieces of furniture. And, his only goal was to sort of break even. He didn't really need to, his intention was not to make a profit. Well, in that case, even if he hired somebody, say his nephew, to help him stain some of the furniture, and he paid that nephew because it was a hobby, he was not subject to 1099 reporting. But when you have the intention to make a profit, whether you've made one or not is not the point. It's the intention, all right? When you have the intention to make a profit, then you are in business. And when you are in business, you are responsible for potentially having these 1099 reporting requirements, all right? So why does the IRS even care about all this, right? Well, IRS wants its cut of our profit, and your profit, and your profit, and your profit, right? And one of the ways that it helps ensure that you guys are properly reporting your profit is when, as a business owner, I give you a 1099 that says you did a service for me. The IRS is going to go look and say, Larry says that Lisa did some service for him. Did Lisa report that income? Right. So that's the gist behind it, is to ensure that everybody's properly reporting their income. Well, there's different types of income, and there's different types of reporting reports that you have to give out. If they did a service for you, then it would be the 1099 NEC. If you are paying rent, that's if you have an office that you're paying rent for, or maybe a storage unit, okay? Maybe a studio space that you're renting, even on an occasional basis. If you're over that threshold, then you would need to do a 1099 miscellaneous and report the rent there. Now, if you are an artist, you might get a 1099 miscellaneous because you're getting royalties. So there are different reasons that you get these different reports, right? Depending on what kind of business or what kind of revenue was earned. Now let's go back to being in business, right? I explained the difference between being in business in a for-profit scenario. If you are a nonprofit organization and you have people that do services for you, you are still required, same requirements, okay? So don't think that just because you don't have that profit motive that you don't have these obligations. But as an individual, let's say that I'm going to go back to my scenario. I, as an individual, hire somebody to help me with my personal website that I put out there because I want my friends and family to know what I had for breakfast this morning, right? I'm not charging them to know that. I just want to share that with them. Well, if I pay him $800 as an individual, I don't have to send him a 1099 at all, right? So if I have my plumber come over earlier this year, I had to have the propane guys come out and fill up my tank and do a test to see if the propane was leaking. All of that's personal. And although I am paying them for a service, I personally am not in a business that would require that. Now, if I had an office building that had a propane tank that needed to be serviced, guess what? That would be, as a business, first of all, that's a business expense I can take as a deduction on my tax return for my business. And second, it's an exchange of goods or services for compensation with their ideas to make money, right? Their idea is to make a profit. And I am in business. And therefore, then I would be subject to 1099 reporting. So we've established that most of us here, anyways, are a business already, most likely, right? If maybe you're getting ready to be, guess what? You didn't have anything in 2022. Be ready for 2023, all right? I'm going to share my screen real quick with you guys. I'm going to try and share my screen real quick with you. There we go. All right. So everybody nod. Yes, Lisa, if you can see that we have the 1099 cheat sheet up. Yay. All right, thanks, guys. All right, so first of all, we've established that, yes, you are a trade or business. Hot diggity dog. The second step in determining whether or not you are required to give this vendor a 1099 NEC is, did you pay them more than $600 cumulative throughout the year? Right? It's not in one shot. It's over the course of the entire year, January 1st to December 31st, right? So you've got to keep your records all throughout the year so that you can add them up and make sure that in total it's over $600. Okay, if that answer is yes, then you go on to the next block, right? Did you make these payments with cash, check, or a wire transfer, an ACH, directly from bank to bank, or directly from my hand to yours with, actual dollars, right? If you pay them with a credit card, instead of you giving them a 1099 NEC, the credit card company may be obligated to give them a 1099 pay. And this is a relatively new thing. And just a few days ago, IRS changed its whole thing, and they're going back to the levels where unless they gave you more than $20,000 or more than $20,000, they're not going to give you this 1099K. In 2023's year, that might change. They're trying to change that to $600, just like the rest of the 1099s. So be aware that this change may be coming, all right? So again, if you paid them with a credit card, Even if you paid them more than $600, you don't have to give them a 1099. So again, we're going to try and answer yes to all 5 of these questions. Are you a trade or business? Yes. Did I pay them more than $600? Yes. Did I pay them with cash, check, ACH, wire transfer? Zelle is one of those bank-to-bank transfers that count when you're deciding how you've paid people. PayPal, Venmo, those don't count, right? If the answer is yes, I paid them with cash, check, so on, did they provide a service for me? If the answer is yes, they provided a service, well, then we get to go on to the next step, right? So if you bought material from them, say that you are you're in a band and you bought a guitar, or you are a financial coach and you're paying for a membership, neither of those are services. And so that wouldn't be subject to it. It has to be a service that was rendered. Okay. So did they provide a service to you? If the answer to that is yes, then you have to determine whether or not they are a corporation. I know there's 5 things, and that can be a little overwhelming. But this corporation is really important. If they are a C corporation, if they're an S corporation, if they are a nonprofit organization or a governmental agency, none of those do you have to give a 1099 to. All right. Now, remember, if you are one of those, you may have to give 1099s. But if I, as a business owner, do business with, and I provide a service for a corporation provides a service to me, then I'm not required to give them a 1099. Think about maybe Office Depot, all right? Office Depot, yes, I can go buy supplies there. I can buy pens and paper and such, but I can also get them to do some printing for me. Well, printing is a service, but they're a corporation. And I know this. Why? Because I got a Form W-9 from them. Right? And it doesn't matter whether in their name they have the words INC or corp or that sort of thing, or LLC, right? The LLC is really throws you off because you don't know how that limited liability company is taxed. And you won't know that unless you get a Form W-9 from that vendor. So best practice says that you should get a Form W-9, well, from everybody for everything, because you never know when they're going to do a service for you. You might buy supplies from them and then find out a little bit later on that, wow, they do this really great service and I want to use them too for that. Well, if you've been doing business with them for a couple of years, you might not think that they might not be a C corporation or an S corporation. And all of a sudden now you're paying more than $600 for them to do a service for you, and you're required to give them a W-9. Then you have to go back to them at the end of the year and scramble and try and find who to get it from and where. The other thing about getting a W-9 from people is that it helps make sure that you know to give them a 1099 or not. Let's think if they work outside of the United States, they're from the Philippines, or you get a virtual assistant from India. Well, they wouldn't give you a W-9, they would give you a W-8-BEN, whole different form that says, hey, we understand that you are required potentially to give out these 1099s. We're going to give you this form that says we're not subject to that. And that helps you defend yourself when the IRS comes and says, how come you didn't give them a 1099? You're going to say, well, because they gave me this form W-8-BEN, we're not required to. Awesome. So this form W-9, you should get it, best practice says, from everybody. Well, sometimes that can be a little overwhelming and kind of, well, silly, right? Especially if you're a smaller business and you don't have like tons and tons of administrative staff. So at very minimum, you should get a W-9 from anybody that does a service for you before you pay them for the very first time, before you pay them. If you wait until afterwards, well, first of all, you might have been needing to get a W-8-BEN instead. And second, there's a spot on here that says that they are actually subject to withholding. And if you knew about that before you paid them, then, well, gosh, you better withhold, right? But more the point is a lot of the times we'll have somebody do a service for us just once a year. Let's go back to the web designer, right? He comes in, he creates this gorgeous website for us. It is super functional, super fast. It gets us lots of customers in the door. Yay, we're very happy with him. We paid him, I don't know, $2,500 to do this. And we've gotten way more than you know, we expected to on the return of it. Yay. But he did that in February. And here it is, January of the next year. And we realized that we should do a 1099 for this guy, maybe, because we don't know whether he's a corporation or not. Certainly, we paid him with check. And so we're stuck at this point that we need to know whether he's a corporation. So we call him up and number is no longer in service. Huh. All right. Well, we look on the invoice and he doesn't even have his full address on there. It just says Austin, Texas. It doesn't even have like, now how are we going to get a hold of this guy? Right? You know, you can do some investigative things and you know, sleuth around on the internet and maybe find him. But are we going to be able to do that in time to timely file the 1099 NEC for him? Those are due, by the way, January 31st, right? January 31st is the due date on this. This is the day that you have to file both with the IRS and with and you have to give it to the person. One thing to keep in mind on that is that you can't just download the form from the IRS, all right? Here's the form. You see how it has this pretty little pinkish red color? The IRS has very specific coloring that it needs if you're going to file a paper form. Now you can do it electronically through a service like 1099 and Tax 1099 or track1099.com. Both of those will file them for you electronically. That's the way I like to do it because I can see that it immediately went out and they file with the IRS. You have proof that it actually occurred, and you don't have to go to the post office and stand in line to get it stamped with certified return receipt or anything like that. So highly recommend that you do it with one of those online services, because again, you can't just download the forms and send them out that way. Going back to that W-9 though, it's always best to get it up front so you don't run into those problems where you're scrambling the last minute, right? One of the other things that as you as a business owner on this side of the table are looking at the W-9s coming in, you need to make sure that this name up here in box 1 matches the appropriate type of taxpayer identification number that's down here in part 1. Most disregarded entities. That would be a limited liability company that has just one owner to it that's filing a Schedule C. They're going to file that Schedule C with their personal tax return, which means that their name in box 1 has got to be their personal name and their social security number, not the name of their limited liability company and its EIN. Okay, that's a big thing that will really throw you off. And guess what? If they don't match you, because you didn't match that name with the taxpayer appropriately, and you gave them a 1099, you may actually get a notice from the IRS that says, hey, these things don't match with the type of tax return that we were expecting from that taxpayer. And if it goes on for too long, then you're actually required to withhold, I believe it's 25% now. 25% of what you were going to pay that guy, now you have to withhold and send it directly to the IRS on their behalf because they didn't fill out this form correctly. Now, on the flip side of that, if you're providing services to businesses, right? You are in a band and you're going out and singing at restaurants. That's a service that you're providing for a business. When you provide them with your W-9, you better fill that out properly also. Okay, so it goes both ways, right? So let's go back to these 5 steps. 1, are you a trade or business? We've established that at least most of us today are trades or businesses because we're in it for a profit. We've paid more than $600 and we didn't use credit cards or debit cards or another payment processor like PayPal or Venmo or Amazon. And these people provided us a service. The biggest thing, the biggest hurdle then would be, are they a corporation or not? If they are not, that's when we need to provide a form 1099 NEC to these people by when? January 31st. All right, you guys, that was a lot of information, really, really quick. All right, but one of the great things about having live interactions like this is that you can ask questions. All right, I know that you've got a very specific question about your business or about your vendors. What do you got out there?
Okay, I'll go. Nobody else is jumping in. With the risk of embarrassing myself, I am new to running a business. I got my LLC in December of 22.
Okay.
But it's a crazy business. So as you've mentioned, I run a band. And so I have 2 questions, basically. They're probably very similar. I have had one venue that paid me directly a little more than $600, right? So I got the 1099 from them, or I'm sorry, the W-9.
Right.
Yeah, okay, all right, great. I thought I got that right. And so what I'm hearing is I need to fill that out with my name and social instead of the EIN. Okay, so that's one thing.
Let's clarify that. If you are a disregard, if the LLC is a disregarded entity, so if you're going to file as a Schedule C on your 1040 tax return, that would be a disregarded entity. Okay, then yes, you need to put your legal name on box 1 of the Form W-9
Mhm.
You could put your LLC name on box 3, okay, but you need to put your social security number in part 1.
So I guess I better get that form back to the venue with that correction.
Uber super quick.
Yeah. So, okay, second question, and then I'll pass the hat. So the venue that paid me this money, I ended up paying out of that money other bands.
Yes.
What do I give them? And am I mean, currently it sounds like I am on the hook for that total amount, but what do I give to these other bands that made, a couple of $100?
Right. So first of all, they provided a service to you.
Mhm.
They were a guitarist or a singer or a sound engineer. They provided a service for you for which you paid them. Right? I realize that the venue paid you and then you paid them. So what happens for your federal taxes there is that you're going to report the amount that the venue paid you at the top for your gross revenue. And then you're going to have contractors as an expense, right? So the net is what you're going to pay taxes on. But that contractor block, you have to go through those 5 steps. Are you a trade or business? We've established yes. Did you pay them more than $600? Right? If the answer was yes, then you move to the next block. Did you pay them with cash, check, ACH, or wire? Right? The answer is yes. Then they provide you a service. Yes, we've established that. Are they a corporation? You don't know that they are or not until they give you the Form W-9.
Okay.
Right? Even if you believe with all your heart that they are not a corporation, you need every single piece of information on that W-9 to properly fill out the 1099.
And of course, I haven't paid anybody more than $600.
And it doesn't matter.
So essentially they would just, right, okay, so essentially they would be just simply an expense for me.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
They would be an expense for you. Now, technically, they are required to report that income, regardless of whether or not you give them a 1099.
Got it.
Right? Just because you don't receive a 1099 when you think you should, doesn't mean anything. You still have to report that income.
Right. And that's on them, not on me to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Okay. So it sounds like the only thing I really need to do is resubmit that form to the venue, and we're good.
You got it. Do it.
Thank-
Do it tonight.
I'm going to do it tonight, right after this. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. So we have a couple questions in the chat. Heather asks, if as the service provider, I used my DBA EIN as opposed to the personal SSN or my W-9, can that be corrected when I file my taxes as opposed to reissuing the W-9s? The answer is no. It is your responsibility as the submitter of the W-9 information to the person to whom you provided the information that you provided the service. It is your responsibility to make sure that that's updated and that it is correct and accurate, complete and accurate. So let's say this year I moved, so my address changed. I'm required, because I moved, my business moved, right, to update everybody that I dealt with in 2022 with my new address. All right. So if you have incorrect information on the W-9, it's not complete and accurate as of right now, then you need to really get with, you need to submit that to everybody that you've provided services to. The other question was, as the service provider, if payers don't issue the 1099, do I have an obligation to collect them? No, it's not your job to make sure they do their reporting correctly. It's your job to make sure you do your reporting correctly. So all you have to do is make sure that you have correct information to them, and then you report your income properly to the IRS. What they do, whether they do their job right or not, is really not even up to you, right? All right, so let's see. So the 1099-C is not a 1099 NEC. Kira, I'm not sure I know what the 1099-C is. There was a 1099 miscellaneous, MISC, and that still exists. The 1099 miscellaneous is used to report rent. So if you've, again, rented a studio space or a storage unit or an office space, then you would need to give your landlord a 1099 miscellaneous. If you, oftentimes as an artist, you might get royalties, and you would see that on a 1099 miscellaneous. And then I have 2 raised hands, and I'm trying to figure out how to get to them. So if you raise your hand and you have a question, why don't you unmute yourself and ask it?
Hi, this is Elisa with Tala. I wanted to follow up on Daryl's question, because his question is the question that we get all the time about using your social security number or an EIN. I get that you're saying that whatever, it kind of depends on how you want to file your taxes, right? If you're using the Schedule C to go with your social security number. But a lot of bands, they have these EINs because they say, oh, I don't want to give out my social security number, I'm going to give out my EIN. And then I'm assuming that that requires them to file a separate tax return for that EIN.
If they, okay, so the answer is, in simplicity, is yes. They must file a separate tax return. So again, if it's a limited liability company, taxed as a disregarded entity, that's a big IRS-y word, okay? But what that means is that the LLC is going to be taxed under a personal tax return. It could be taxed under another entity's tax return, but if it's under your personal tax return, you must put your legal name, the one that you're using to file the tax return, and your social security number. If it's a band and it is owned by a number of people, more than one, then it will be taxed not as a Schedule C on a 1040 tax return, but as a partnership or a corporation, because it has more than one owner. Okay, so if it's more than one owner and it's not a disregarded entity, then yes, but then it would be filing a partnership tax return. And even as a partnership, I still have to well, then you would put the partnership's legal name, and the partnership's EIN, because it is a separate tax return. Now, the same goes for an S corporation. For example, my husband is a single member limited liability company. He has a music production studio, and he is filing an S corporation tax return. So we are not filing it under our personal 1040 tax return. We file a separate tax return called an 1120S tax return. And in that case, he does not put his social security number there. He puts his EIN that goes with that, because it is a separate tax return. But in the case of Daryl, where he is a sole proprietor, even though he's got a limited liability company with an EIN, right? It must match the type of tax return that the W-9 must match the type of tax return that you are.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
Right. If he's a sole proprietor. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a little complicated to understand, and we get this question a lot. So I think I understand, and it's something to think about, I guess, when you're setting up your LLC about how you're going to operate. That goes back a little further than just deciding whether to get an EIN or not.
And you should get an EIN, even if you are a sole proprietor. for several reasons. One is that to get a bank account, almost, especially after the pandemic, and we had to go through the paycheck protection programs. Almost every single bank now is going to require you to have an EIN in order to get a business bank account. And by sure, you should have a separate business bank account. That's going to require you to have an EIN. In addition, having an EIN, it shows the IRS that you aren't doing this as a hobby, and that you can take all of the deductions, those tax deductions that you want to take against the income that's coming in. All right. So going back to Daryl, if he was just doing a hobby and that venue was paying just him, even if he's splitting the money with those other guys, he doesn't get to take that as a tax deduction as a hobby. It
Right.
sucks,
Okay.
but that's the difference between being in business and having hobby.
Okay.
The IRS has this really, really awesome, I'm in the chat, I've put a link to the little video. It's like 5 or 6 minutes long, where it kind of explains when to use an NEC and the difference between NEC and miscellaneous. I can't talk. 1099 miscellaneous and 1099 NEC. Well, it also describes kind of a little better than I just did that you absolutely must use your social security number if you are going to basically be a sole proprietor. Right. And so Daryl's question was, okay, so can I file separately as a disregarded entity? Not unless you file for a S corporation. And then you have to file a whole separate tax return, and that can get a little expensive because now you're filing your personal tax return. You have a separate tax return, then you take the K1 from that tax return, put it on this tax return. Okay. Oftentimes, in order to get the tax advantages of an S corporation, as a single member LLC, you would need to be making somewhere over about $50,000 in net income in order to take advantage of a S corp. Okay, if you need some more information on that, I've got a really great little 5-minute video on that on my resources of my website, visionating.com. That'll help you guys out there. So Chelsea, you had your hand up. What question do you have?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. The first one, so I'm doing the taxes for a short film, and we, rent gear from a production house. Would they, since that's a rent, would they get a 1099 miscellaneous?
That's a great question for which I actually don't have the answer to that. I tell you what, if you will private message me your email, I will get you the answer to that question.
Okay.
I know for sure that when you're renting property that it's required, but off the top of my head, rental of equipment, I'll need to look that one up. Great question though.
So if we then rented property, like say we paid a location fee to film at like a home or something like that, that owner of that property would get a 1099?
I would think so, yes.
Okay, and that would be a 1099 miscellaneous.
Yes, 1099 miscellaneous.
Okay. And then the other question I had is, we used a payroll system, Gusto, and
Oh yeah,
so
like Grease and Gusto.
yeah, and we have to submit some corrections. And I was just curious, because the corrections are going to come after the postmark deadline of 1099s, like, are we mandated to send the incorrect, like the original 1099 to that contractor? Or can we wait until we get the corrected 1099 to send to them?
No, if you send it before, because otherwise then then you get penalized for not sending them on at a timely fashion. And that was another question, is what are the consequences of not issuing 1099s? There's a potential fine of $50 per 1099 that you did not issue that you should have. And then there's $250 fees that go up beyond that, especially when you don't withhold things properly and so on. All right, Daryl also has that equipment question. So again, Daryl, if you'll private message me your email, I will get that to you. In addition to that, as we are recording this, I'm going to send the recording out to everybody that registered, and I'll include the answer to that question in that as we send that out. Kira, you had a question. You're muted.
Yes, there we go. So my situation is pretty complicated. So as a stagehand, and several companies, about a half a dozen companies I work for, half are W-2 jobs, half are 1099. And then as a sound engineer, I get 1099s for companies I run sound for. And then I have my sound company, and I get 1099s from venues that I work at when I make over 600. So I thought that was 1099-C, and when I look at the forms, I don't see 1099-C as an option anymore. I thought,
yeah.
So that's now the 1099-NEC.
If
I 1099 someone for running sound for me, for my company, I issue them a 1099-NEC now, right?
Correct.
Okay, because before I thought it was a 1099-C, and then like I would get them from a venue if I went in and ran sound there, etc. Okay.
Well, back in the day, there was everybody got 1099 miscellaneous, MISC, and that was the only one that was out there for quite a few years. The 1099 NEC used to exist umpteen years ago, way before I started doing accounting, right? Before I became a CPA. They've brought it back so that they can distinguish more between services and then all the other types of things that they want to kind of track, right? So,
Well, I have a follow-up question to that. So in addition to all of that income, then there's the business, the sound business, and then the financial coaching business. So I thought that those would end up being two separate Schedule Cs that I still file under my Social Security number, because I'm a sole prop, no employees, like for both businesses. So it'd be two separate Schedule Cs, but under my social.
perfect.
Okay.
Yes. My husband and I, we have 3 Schedule Cs, an S Corp, and a partnership. And so you can have a number of different things. And one of the reasons that you might want to have multiple types of, or multiple Schedule Cs is, like in my husband's case, he's, yes, a music producer, but he also has his own songs that he writes and sings. And so he wants to separate legally the stuff that he does for himself from the stuff that he collaborates with everybody else. And so he has 2 different limited liability companies. One is a Schedule C, and the other is an S corporation. So some questions that we have in the chat are the name of the payroll program that Chelsea was mentioning. That's gusto.com, gusto.com. I really like it. It does help you issue 1099s and gather the W-9 information from your service providers. So it can really be a really great tool. Again, there are some other things out there like Tax 1099 that I use to do my 1099s for my vendors. That is really easy to use online. It can connect to something like QuickBooks or Xero, or you can just manually put them in. if you only have a few, then a few 1099s to issue, they end up being like somewhere between $3 and $5 a piece, depending on whether or not you want to mail the person the actual hard copy of the 1099, or if giving them an email is adequate, right? Gwen, you have your hand raised.
Hi there. I have my coaching business. I'm in private practice, and then I have a travel agency.
Okay.
Sole proprietor. My coaching business is a limited liability corporation registered with Ohio and sole proprietor.
Okay.
So the question is, I actually just sent something to my local county for becoming a woman business owner, or recertifying as a woman business owner, a minority business owner, small business owner. And so maybe I sent them the wrong W-9 now, because what it has is my EIN number. It's got Gwendolyn Rise. It's got my U.S. Wealth School on the next line. And it's got my EIN. I didn't even put my social security number. Should I just do both or what?
It will confuse the person that you send it to if you do both. Okay.
It's government, so they're going to be confused anyway.
All right. Well, when you're filling out the W-9, there's a couple of things to, the W-9. I'm going to share my screen again real quick. And again, this is on the cheat sheet that you guys had access to. I'll send it again when I send out a copy of this recording, so that you guys can make sure that you see it. And how do I share my screen? Oh, there it is, right there in the middle. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. All right, so on Form W-9, this is box 1 says the name shown on your income tax return. Okay, so Gwen says, okay, she put Gwen in here properly. Okay, and then she put her business name, Business ABC. All right, but then she went over here and put her EIN instead of her social security number, right? But look at this right here. The TIN provided must match the name given on line 1. Line 1 was Gwen. Gwen is not the EIN. Gwen is the social security number. Is everybody following me there? Say yes, Lisa. Okay.
Actually, yes.
There is
So
one thing though, sorry to interrupt you, because I was looking at this too.
Mhm.
'Cause I had the same question. If you look at the instructions on like for part 1, which is past the form section, if you scroll down, it does say for, if you go down, okay, where is the, I think you have to keep going. Okay, yeah, keep going.
Part 1.
Okay, here. Part 1, taxpayer identification number. Enter your TIN in the appropriate box. And then the next paragraph says, if you are a sole proprietor and you have an EIN, you may enter either your SSN or EIN.
Okay, and that is not incorrect. But if you have an LLC that has an EIN,
Mhm.
that is not the same thing as a sole proprietor with an EIN,
Yep, got it.
right? So if it is a single member LLC that is disregarded, that means you're filing it, the LLC is being filed under your tax return, then it has to have your social security number. And when, well, I wish I could get to that point in the little video, but it is very, very explicit when you listen to that video. Guys, go in the chat. I'm going to include this when I send you guys. Go in there. It very, very specifically says you must put, these must match. In addition to that, if you check this box here, individual, sole proprietor, or single member LLC, right? The only time that you're going to be able to do this EIN is if you're a sole proprietor with an EIN, not an LLC with an EIN. I mean, I understand that giving out your social security number makes you feel uncomfortable, right? But that is part of doing business as a sole proprietor. And an LLC does not protect your social security number from your IRS obligations. All right, it does have some risk mitigation from potentially people with litigation against you and your business or what have you, but the IRS has its own rules that are outside of a limited liability company. The limited liability company really stops at the state level, and then at the IRS level, at the federal level, it's whatever you decide to file as, then that's what the IRS is going to expect to see on both the forms W-9 that you send out and your whatever tax return you're going to file. Chelsea asks, can a business send a 1099 NEC to a contractor they've been paid PayPal? I would advise not doing that, because if they've received more than $20,000 from PayPal, they are going to get a 1099-K from PayPal. And then it will look to the IRS like they got that you paid them $600 and PayPal paid them $600. Now the IRS is going to expect them to report $1,200. Well, we don't want that to happen for sure, right? So if you paid them via PayPal, no. That's why you got to have that one step in there. How did you actually pay them? Cash, check, wire transfer, ACH, Zelle, anything bank to bank or hand to hand. If I paid a vendor, Austin asks, via a credit card through their QuickBooks or something similar, do I need to send them I do not need to send them a 1099. That's correct. You're correct, because you paid them with the credit card. Again, just like with the PayPal, the credit card company that let's say it was Visa. If Visa collects and remits more than this year $20,000 to that vendor, then they're going to send them a 1099-K. And just like with the PayPal question, if you sent them also a 1099, then it would look like they got double dipped, and then they're going to have to explain to the IRS, no, my records show that I only earned $600 and I don't have, it's not 12. So you're correct. If you paid them with a credit card, you do not send them a 1099. Even if you paid them with a credit card for $1,000 and in cash for $300, no 1099. Now let's say you paid them in cash $700 and in credit card $3,000, then guess what? You have to send them a 1099 for $700. Boy, I wanted to really raise their rates, didn't I? Ken asks, it gets more complicated when the disregarded entity is owned by another entity. Makes my head spin. Yes, Ken, that is true. So if the disregarded entity is owned by a partnership, right, then that partnership is the one that's kind of like on the hook. So it does get a little complex there. We do have 3 more minutes. Does anybody have just one last question?
I'll ask a question.
All right, Jeremy, go for it.
So so any of our coaching clients that pay us more than $600, we should be sending them a W-9.
Okay, let's think about this. Let's gonna go through the 5 steps really quick. It's a really great question to wrap this up with. First of all, are they in a trade or business?
They are not.
Then they fail the first thing. They are not going to send you a 1099,
Okay. So it's
right? So
only,
you don't.
so it's only between services, companies that provide services to somebody that provides services
No. To another trade or business.
to another trader, but that's what I meant.
Right.
Trade business.
Right.
Okay.
So, for example, I am a business coach and a CPA. And so if I provide services, my business coaching services to Jeremy, who is a coach, he is a business, right? His coaching business, then his business would pay me, not him personally, because I'm providing his business a service. And in that case, I would provide him a W-9. In fact, I provide my W-9s with my service agreements. So as when in combination with my service agreement, you're going to get a W-9 from me so that you know that if you pay me over $600, then you're just automatically going to have my information. So I get ahead of the game. But if you're providing personal services, say you're a piano teacher to 3-year-olds, well, that's a personal service, or it's a service, but you're providing it to a person, not a trade or business. So they wouldn't, that 3-year-old's grandson isn't going to give you a 1099, and you're not obligated to give them W-9.
So just to take it another step forward, if a coach hires another coach, then it would be, you would follow that loop.
If that coach is paying them through that, if Coach A hires Coach B, Jeremy hires Lisa to help him with his business, and the business pays Lisa, right? Then yes, 1099. If Jeremy hires Lisa to help him with his personal stuff, guess what? Jeremy is a person, not a trade or business. He might have a business, but that's irrelevant because the business didn't pay me and it's not going to take that tax deduction.
Makes sense?
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, guys, I know this was a lot, and I appreciate you guys sticking with me all the way through it, even 1 minute past. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you, Tala, for helping us out, and Coach Connections. Remember that I do business coaching for free every Thursday at noon Central Time. If you want more information on that, it's on my website at visionating.com. You can also connect with me at lisa@visionating.com. All right, you guys, thanks so much. And remember, the deadline is January 31st. Bye, all.